Good morning, everybody. Um, Looks like we're sitting with enough people in here to conduct business. And Angela, you're on the road today. Are you able to um kick us off? Angela, I saw you come off mute, but you went right back on mute. Angela, are you able to unmute with us? Dan, I see you in the meeting. Are you able to maybe kick us off and then maybe Angela can join a little bit later?
Sure. We ready to go?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we
Yes,
go.
I can.
Okay, cool. Sorry, my headphones were not connecting.
No worries.
Okay, so first on the agenda, we can do roll call.
All right, Angela Haupt,
Oops, here.
Dan Young,
Here.
Jenny Look,
Here.
Quinn Tai, not seen in the room today. Patrick Hanks,
Here.
thank you. Ron Perkowicz, not seen in the room. Ken Brulette,
Okay, well, this is tricky. Yeah, I'm here as Seattle Fire Department, but I'm not here as the extra for the fire code for the consultant position. So I don't know what to do. I can't play both roles.
okay, so
So if you need me for a quorum, then I will get on a different computer.
we should be okay for a quorum if you are not going to represent that slot today.
Hey, Dustin, I just showed up too,
okay.
so FYI.
Thank you,
Quinn.
Quinn. All right, so Ken, I'm going to mark you as absent from this one.
Okay.
And we should be okay. And then if we have an issue, I'll raise it and we'll see where we're at. But we got some extras in the seats today.
All right, thanks.
Josh Mergens,
Present. There's a chance I may have to step away depending on a call from some folks in the field, but I will let you know if and when that may arise.
gotcha. Thank you. Barry Kurth, not seen in the room today. Justin Carvalho,
Here.
thank you. Mariko Blessing,
Here.
Jonathan Jones, not seen in the room. Leah Summer, similar, not seen in the room. And Annie O'Rourke,
Here.
thank you. And with that, we do have a quorum. We're sitting with 2 extra seats represented over the 5 we need to establish quorum today.
Dustin, I just signed in. Ron Perkowitz.
Thank you, Ron. So that puts us at 1 more seat over. So we're at 8 in our seats represented.
Okay, perfect. Okay, now next, we need to review and approve the agenda. Can I get a motion for that?
Do we want to give the public opportunity to introduce it all? Not hearing anything from anybody.
Not seeing. Okay, now we can move on to the reviewing and approving of today's agenda.
So moved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Josh Mergens is the second.
Okay, is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The same? Motion B is to review and approve the minutes from the last two meetings. So if you could,
So up on screen is the August 5th minutes. And if there's any comments, please just raise hand and we can talk about potential edits. All right, that was the August 5th. Coming up are the August 7th meeting minutes. That's the end of those minutes. Any comments or discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
is there a second?
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? All right. Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed, the same. All right, that motion passes. All right, we will now move on to agenda item 4 and go over the first reading of the IRC amendments proposals. Justin?
All right, I'll kick it off. I'm opening them up, and we sent out notification to the proponents to let them know that we're having a first reading here today. Based on what I see here in our guest list, I don't think all of them are here, but I will call them out and then give opportunity for proponents to speak. And then if no one's there, I will introduce and do a first reading. And so up first, I have a proposal on section R330.1. Energy storage systems from Ken Brulette. This is proposal 24-GP2-023. And I didn't expect it to open up like that. All right.
So Dustin, on the proposal, I have a few little slight changes to it. I don't know if you want to make the changes on the document while you're working, or I can show them because I have them highlighted in blue so somebody could look at what was submitted and then the small changes that were made to it for clarification. So what do you
I'd be
guys
happy to
want to
make
do?
changes, but I'll need to pop it open in not a PDF. So give me one moment here.
Yeah. And also during our discussion, at any time you need to look at NFP 855, it's referenced in here. I have that available that I can share
Okay.
the screen.
Yeah, if we need to share that, I'll probably have to stop my share and let you share that when I don't
Okay.
have that document available. All right, so
Okay.
Ken, I will be happy to make some changes. You just point me to them and I'll get typing.
Okay, we'll do the editorial things first. So Ken Brulette, Seattle Fire Department, in the fire marshal's office, put together a code change proposal based on the 2027 IFC code change proposals. The state of Washington, we've been ahead of the game and trying to be a code cycle above. We've done it for our 21 code by adopting the 24 language early. And now we're looking at the 27 language and putting it into our 24 code. So the first editorial changes is under the sections there after where it says chapter 44 reference standards, and in the parentheses it says NFPA. If you can put in and UL.
Inside the parentheses?
You can just put it, inside, yeah.
Okay. just highlight these changes for folks.
You might want to pick a different color because I think that document has yellow already on it,
Okay, let me
if you can.
just do a track change on this.
There you go.
Okay.
All right, and then if you could just scroll down to the section, section 4, there you go. All right, so what we have at the state is we have some current wax sections, and we're going to have to renumber some of those. So the first part is I'm sorry, let me turn off this phone. The first change here is the R330.1. So in the model code, right now it says energy storage systems shall comply with this section. And the 27 code amendment clarifies a little bit, and it talks about if they have an aggregate capacity of 1 kilowatt hour or greater, shall comply with Chapter 15 and NFPA 855. So why are we doing this? So the NFPA 855 is during their code development process, they just finished the 2026 edition at NFPA 855, and it's available for pre-sale right now. So it's gone through the entire process. They're just printing it up right now. And that's the where all the latest and greatest code provisions are located right now is 855. So what I've done here is take that 2027 code change proposal and include that language in here that points to 855. So the exception here is ESS listed and labeled for use in habitable spaces according to YO 9540. We're installed in accordance with the listing, the manufacturer's instructions, NFPA 70. The change that I want to have here is we're actually going to delete, if you can show that exception, deleted and the number 1 deleted. And the reason being is that there's going to be a new section, an R330.1.1, that will take into consideration that exception. So I just need you to scratch the number 1 and the word exceptions also.
Okay. These formattings are fun, so. Okay, I'll have to clean this one up, but we're pretty much, it's there, but the format's being fun.
Okay.
I'll have to clean that up just a little bit.
So this next part might be a little easier for me to show, and then you can type on your document. So if you don't
Yeah, here I'm
mind
gonna
me.
there, and if you request it, you might get a permission. There you go. Cool.
Okay, so what I've done here is add in this R331.1, which is a section that was brought up for the IFC, the 2027 change is compliance with NFPA 855 only. And it says the following ESS system shall only be required to comply with 855. So what this means is if you have one of these, you just use 855. You don't use the rest of the fire code. And it says here, ESS systems that comply with all the requirements of section 15.1.3 of NFPA 855, which is this section up here. And I will help show you a little bit here, because this is when it gets a little fun. So I'll scroll over here so you can see what that is. So 15.13, chapter 15 shall not apply to ESS that comply with the following. And it includes this right here. So that's this stuff here that you see here. In addition, AHJ is provided with the UL 9548 cell level report.
We're still just looking at the Word document.
Oh, you are? I'm sorry. Why didn't it take it over? That's funny. Well, let me just change the share here.
Dan's had his hand up for quite a
There we
So I just have a quick question on the NFPA 855, Ken. Since you said
Mhm.
it's the 2026 version that they've updated this, do we need to put that in that it's the 2026 version? Because
and
if,
you'll see that. You'll see that in my code change proposal.
okay, all right,
It's already in there now if you see it in the code change proposal. If you scroll down to
okay,
the chapter, if you have the code change proposal up and scroll down, you'll see where I've added it in.
okay, thank you.
Okay. So anyways, this is the section here that's referencing in the previous document. Let me see if this, are you guys now back to the Word document?
No, it's still seeing
No.
the NFPA.
Okay. I just got to keep bouncing back and forth. All right, here we go. Okay, so that's what it's referencing here, the 15.1.3 NF55, and then also in NFPA 855, it has a flywheel energy storage system that are installed in accordance. So again, this is just some pointers to make sure that if you have something that meets the 15.13 or if it's a flywheel, that you're not going to be using this section of the fire code. You're just going to go to 855. So again, the big part of this is we're just trying to go to 855. All right, I'll let you take back over. Do you need to see this still to keep typing?
Just a couple more seconds.
Okay.
Okay, you're good. Thank you, Ken.
I see Patrick,
Yeah.
I might as well call you since I see you.
I was just gonna suggest, since we don't have a ton of time today, if you just want to run through it with your changes, Ken, and then we can always bring it back
Okay.
at a future meeting with a revision to
Well,
take final action.
yeah, so let me just do that just with my changes in blue.
Okay,
Okay. If that's all right, I can do that. That makes it easier.
that works.
Okay. So the other change is under the equipment listing section here. Is energy storage system to be listed and labeled in accordance with UL 9540. There's some exceptions about for lead acid, aqueous nickel based and aqueous metal air batteries, but they all have to still comply with this specific section of NFPA 855. So that's just added in there as a reference. And then why this is all deleted here is because that's actually that section of NFPA 855. And again, Dustin, I can email this
That'd be
when
great.
I'm done.
So far, I'm keeping up, but if we get if I get this one back, it'll make sure I don't mess it up.
Okay. And we're almost done with the blue stuff. The changes. The only thing I did here in the very end here, I had the wrong reference numbers here. I was pointing to the older reference number that was used, so I just updated it. And then in the reference standard section, NFPA section, I updated the additional reference sections here and deleted the ones that were wrong. And then the UL 9540 just updated it to the 2023 edition, and also added in the March. I see Quinn's got his hand up.
Yeah, so the quick question is, I'm looking at the IFC, the 2024 IFC, and 855 is still referenced to the 20 version. So would this be a potential conflict if we did the 26 on the IRC, whereas the IFC is the 20?
No, I believe my code change proposal for the IFC, because you're talking about the IFC, right?
Yeah, and
And my
I'm looking at the
yeah,
code change proposal that you
yeah.
submitted,
So
and I don't
so in
see
my
that.
public, yeah, so in my public comment, when if they ever gets out there in the real world, that's gonna be my public comment to update it to 26. I could not do, I did, the 26 wasn't ready enough because they hadn't gone through the second reading yet.
Got it.
So
Okay. Yeah,
that's the
because I'm
reason I
looking.
kept it at 23.
Yeah, because I'm looking at your IFC proposal and it doesn't have any reference to the
Yeah,
855. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't, yeah, because they just had the meeting, just finished it up. So I couldn't quite go there yet. But no, that's part of my gonna be my public comment when if we ever get that chance. And so I don't know how far you got, Dustin.
I pretty much missed the last little bits, but I guess, do you want to continue sharing your screen and continue?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, and then I'm just back down here to, I just cleaned up my explanation and got rid of proposed in the next edition because it's not proposed in the next edition anymore. It is in the next edition. And just updated some sections. And again, all about the NFPA standard. It's available to be for pre-sale and viewed. Um, so again, we're just trying to stay ahead of the game and use the 2027 IFC RB 144 code change proposal that's gone through as submitted and just update our 24 international residential code with those changes.
All right, is there any other comments for Ken? Yeah, Patrick?
I have a question. What will this do for, is it like for life safety or is it just editorial or is there some material? What's the benefit with going with this over the model code?
Well, I can tell you where this is extremely advantageous. The model code limits the size of the ESS in residential. This allows somebody in a residence, because of the changes that were made with 855, to have larger ESS in there. So it's actually better for our consumer and our buildings that they can have larger ESS systems. They're not as limited. That's probably the biggest benefit to the user that wants to have an energy storage system in their building or in their house.
And I could also
So
help
that's
answer that too, Ken. The 2027 ICC, they just approved, at least on the committee level, for the 27 code, 855 to be added to the IRC and IBC. So it's still fairly new, but it's being added.
Angela?
Is there any concern that this isn't officially adopted in the base code, that it hasn't gone through the public comment hearings or actual final voting? Since that won't happen until next year.
Are you talking about the RB 144-25?
I'm talking about, you were saying you were bringing the changes in from the 27 code in for this, and the 27 code IFC proposals haven't actually been officially approved for
Yeah,
the 27.
this is actually an IRC one, the RB 144-25. This is the same process that was used before that we did when we amended our code, I believe, before. Not everything had officially been voted on, but it had gone through the process that it was probably going to be on the consent agenda. So I think that's
just making sure.
Yeah,
All right.
I think that's the benefit of this. I believe it's going to all be on that one's going to be on the consent agenda. So I think we're going to be okay. And I'm also been trying to, stay in touch with Robert Davidson, who made this code change proposal, and I'm work with the Fire Code Action Committee and help, watch this thing get walked through.
Patrick.
Yeah, thanks for answering those questions, Ken, and thanks for bringing this. I normally don't love trying to bring stuff ahead, but I think this one has some benefit with allowing the larger sizes, and then I think making it clear that flywheel systems can be used, I think would be good to have that in the code. So I'd be in support of this. I think we could bring it back when we look at the proposals again with the revisions from Ken and vote on it then.
Alrighty. Thank you, Ken. Next one up is a WABO proposal from Julius Carrion on sections R502.8 and R602.6. This is referring to cutting, notching, and boring of framing. This is 24 GP2024. And looking online, I don't see Julius.
I'm here.
Oh, I see you. You're unmuted, so you popped up to the top. Sorry about that. So let me open this up, or would you prefer to share your screen? So
You can open it, Dustin. I think.
okay.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Julius Curry, and I'm representing WABO Technical Code Development Committee on this proposal. We, as Dustin said, this is about cutting, boring, and notching of dimensional wood in the IRC. We submitted TCD a similar proposal in the building code as well last year. It's 24 GP1 052, and the intent of this proposal is just to clarify the spacing of holes and notch for wood studs to be consistent with the joist and beams. So we also submitted this proposal in the IRC 2027 in the ICC process, and the IRC committee, at least in the committee level, has approved it during committee action hearing 1. So it's in the base code process for 2027 IRC as well. So again, this is just to clarify the spacing of holes and notch in joist and studs, particularly with wood studs. The current requirement is you cannot have holes within the same cross section, but there's no requirement or specific requirement for wood studs on how far the holes and the notch should be. So this clarifies, if you look at all these figures down the line, Dustin, and figure for wood studs, yeah. Yeah, this figure right here. So it clarifies that a notch and a hole cannot be less than 2-inch within each other. So that's basically the technical change on this proposal.
Any comments or questions for Julius?
This is Josh Mergens. I'm just saying I remember going through some of this on our IBC proposals and it all made good sense, so I'm in support.
Patrick?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask a similar question that I did with Ken's proposal for Julius. What can you kind of describe what's the benefit, either like life safety or clarification, or what's the basic benefit of if we pass this?
Yeah. So the main benefit, perhaps we can look at the figure again, Dustin. So if you look at this figure, the current requirement for bore holes shall not be located within the same cross section. It's pretty common sense, right? But there's no requirement that how far the holes from the hole must be. So this clarifies that you can have multiple holes within a stud as long as you're not within that 2-inch. So that is a benefit for in the construction industry to have that clear requirement.
Annie?
A couple questions. And I'm not sure how State Building Code Council looks at figures. These get a little confusing with the additional arrows. Is that cleaned up in such a manner that we haven't got a lot of arrows? I think the figure above it, under 502.8, it's just a little confusing, with, no, if you keep, yeah,
Keep going.
that one a little bit, but do you see what I mean? I mean, it's a lot of arrows and stuff, and I'm just wondering how this is gonna be represented, in the code itself, or will it look just like this, all in the same color text?
I mean, for me, it'd be my desire to, I thought similar things, that it could be cleaned up a little bit. But as far as how it will look final in the code published by ICC, I don't have a clear representation of that, but I think that we could work with Julius and others to make sure the diagram it is concise.
Perfect, okay. With regards to removing the text in the wall diagram below that talks about board in the same plane as the notching, does the actual code requirement, yeah, that X'd out text there in the picture, is that actually in the language itself in the code?
Yes.
Okay,
If you go,
perfect.
yeah, it's if you go down the next page, that's where the requirement is that yes, right there. Notches and bore shall not be closer than 2-inch to another notch or hole. So
Right, no, I understand that, but in the same cross section, because my concern was if somebody chooses to go with a 2x8 exterior stud, they can fit a notch and a bored hole in that cross section, and this is no longer preventing them from doing that. So is that a problem?
trying to,
You know, and if you know, a little bit of time is needed, that's fine. My first thought when we were removing that seemed like a really important text, and there was nothing that I could see that referenced in the same cross section in the text. And so do we want to keep that, or are you not seeing that be an issue? So that was one concern. And Dustin, if you can scroll down to, I think it's the top of page 4. Oh, yeah.
You want this diagram?
No, it's actually the text that was added, the notched and bore, the notches and bores.
This here?
What page are you on?
I'm on page 3.
Go down to page 4. It's a highlighted text that was added. Okay, so my only recommendation here, it says notches or bores shall not be closer than. And I understand what you're saying. I'm just wondering if we can say notches or holes, because everywhere else in this particular section, it talks about notches and holes, not notches and bores. Do you see what I mean? I mean, we're kind of using
yeah,
different tense of the word. And if you'd be amenable to saying notches and holes shall not be closer than 2 inches to another notch or hole, I think that it reads better to me.
yeah.
Just
And
a
I'm not,
recommendation.
yeah, okay. But I'm not opposed if the committee or TAG wants to change the word bore to holes. That's fine.
Okay. And then the last thing, it seems that this change should be applicable to roof framing as well, 802.7.1. Because if we're if we're talking about floor joists, if we're talking about wall studs, the same issue should apply to roof framing as well, maybe. So I just want to throw that out there. If it's something that we should include within 802.7.1, we might want to consider that now.
Yeah, we haven't studied 802.7.1 yet, but yeah, happy to look into that.
Alrighty, any other questions or comments for Julius? Not seeing any.
I guess I just want to be clear, like Julius, are you going to be able to bring back a revision for us incorporating and looking at some of the changes that Annie talked about?
So the only revision that I heard is about like the bore word in currently what's shown in the screen can be changed to whole. Do I need to change that? And then the figures, we don't have the CAD department here in our office, so I'm gonna try to work with Dustin in updating the figure in when it hopefully gets approved in a more formal way. But from the technical standpoint, is there anything that the tag would like to change on this proposal that I need to work on?
I'd like to see if it actually applies to roof rafters. I mean, we're making a
Oh,
change.
I'm looking,
Okay.
sorry, Annie, I'm looking
Okay.
at 802.7 that you referenced. It already referenced section 502.8 for boring and notching. So I don't know whether we need to make a change on 802 because it already referenced this section for boring and notching. So I
Great,
think,
okay.
yeah.
Micah?
Thanks. We'll have to get those for the figures from ICC. We've gone through this when we do Seattle modifications or try to fix tables. They have a certain format of all these different tables that are separate from the code format and FrameMaker. So if we approve this and we need that change done, it will have to be done in coordination with ICC when they do these things. So that's just something we don't have access to. Seattle doesn't have access to it either. So we have to work with them to get those changed. Thanks.
Thank you, Micah. All right, Angela.
Did we determine, there was the other comment on removing the same cross-section language? Did we determine, is that actually making a code change, like removing a limitation? Jen?
You know, I think that if a hole and a notch cannot be closer than 2 inches, that therefore it couldn't be in the same plane, right? Because that would, it couldn't be there because that would be closer than 2 inches.
It could if it was a 2x8 or a 2x6 even maybe.
Yeah, so maybe we need to make, I think if you can scroll back up to the diagram, I think what's a little bit confusing is if the diagram is showing, so it's showing what you should be doing, but it also shows what you shouldn't be doing, but it's not necessarily super clear like that, hey, these are the examples of how to do it. It might be nice to have a stud that has a couple of examples of prohibited locations, right? So it's really clear, like here's the ideal and here's a couple examples of common corrections, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, I was gonna say, and I guess if they're if they're allowed to be separated, have to be by 2 inches, then I guess we're saying that it's okay that you could have them side by side like that, as long as there is a 2-inch separation. I mean, that's fine if that's what we're saying.
Right. I just want to add that during the development of this proposal, we coordinated with AWC and NCSEA because they in the 2024 2027 IBC IRC they have similar proposal, and they also removed this boring and notching in the same cross section. So we all agree that the 2-inch spacing is the proper way to have this criteria. So I just want to point out that AWC and NCSEA has also have a similar proposal.
Any other comments for Julius? All right, moving on to the next one. Next one is 24 GP2025. This one is from the city of Tacoma by Lucas Shattuck. This one's proposing a new appendix for the IRC for visitability. And looking online, I don't see Lucas here. So I'll pop it open and we can
Dustin,
run through
I'm
it.
here to cover for Lucas if you want.
Okay, gotcha. Chris, thank you. Do you want to share or should I open up and follow along with you?
If you open it up, that'd be good. Then we
Okay.
make sure we're looking at the same thing.
No. All right.
Thanks.
So-
Okay. Chris Seaman, building official, City of Tacoma. This is a companion proposal that goes alongside of one that we went through the building code on. That one did go through as suggested pass. The intent here is to create an optional appendix. I want to highlight optional for anybody with concerns that would allow jurisdictions to require Type C visitable units in some cases. A Type C visitable unit is a lesser unit than a Type B or Type A accessible unit. It essentially requires, if you want to scroll a little bit down, Dustin, to show the full purpose, this, or just the 101.1, perfect, thanks. The purpose is to make a unit that someone can either age in place, get through with a temporary disability like a knee surgery, or have your neighbors come visit for dinner. It is not intended to be a fully accessible unit. So some of the concerns that might be there from a cost standpoint are really kind of mitigated. The primary thing is get one way in the unit that is essentially accessible. That can be the front door, the back door, the garage itself. So even on a slope site, it's really possible. A architect locally did an assessment and they found that it was about a 1% difference in cost, if that. Whereas if you were looking at a Type B unit, it's significantly more cost. So that's essentially what it is. The intent of this appendix would be a city like Tacoma would adopt it, and it would not apply until we build 3 new units on a site. So we're not talking about custom homes. We're not talking about duplexes. We're not talking about a custom home and an ADU in the backyard. We're talking about what is essentially multifamily development using the IRC. We have experienced multiple sites with, I would say, between 30 and 40 duplex units that, because of the way they are built using the IRC, no accessible features are provided at all on the site, not even this lesser Type C. So we're trying to improve our housing choice for people with disabilities in our city, and we'd like the ability to be able to do that.
Go ahead, Angela.
Is there a minimum dwelling unit size that this applies to? Because my concern is with legislation and their requirements for higher density and all the ADUs that are basically being put in the backyard of,
Mhm.
you know, the main house. For smaller units, you're asking for larger, basically kind of circulation paths. So is there any, you know, consideration for that?
Not directly. You still have the townhouse out. So if you don't have enough living space on a floor, you are exempted from compliance, just in the type C language that's in the ANSI standard. But you can make this work with a studio, teeny tiny little unit. We're not talking the full clearances on anything. Uh, Mostly it's about doorway widths. Doors need to be 32 inches, which is pretty standard. It's not technically required, but most builders choose to use a doorway that's wide. That's not that wide.
Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for talking about this, and I know that there's a similar proposal on the IBC side. Appreciate Lucas trying to bring forward that to coordinate, but I wasn't really in favor of the IBC proposal, and I'm definitely not in favor of this proposal on the IRC side. I think that we need to be lowering the cost of construction and lowering requirements as much as possible to address the housing crisis. And I'm in favor of, meeting any state or federal laws for accessibility. If there's things that we need to do to bring that in line, totally in favor of that. But this is not that. I think it's just gonna decrease design flexibility and increase construction cost. If local jurisdictions really want to adopt something like this, they can go through an amendment process. But I'm not in favor of making this an appendix at the state code. And if the tag does end up wanting to move this forward, I think that we would need to amend it similar to how the IBC did, just to make it clear that it's optional and not mandatory in the charging language. So thank you.
Annie?
Just a couple observations. You're using terms like type A and type B units. Those aren't defined in chapter 2 of the IRC unless they were added at some point that I didn't see. And so my first thought was, is there a way we can bring in the text from, 1005 to create your appendix rather than this excerpted one that shoves you to it, especially with not having all the definitions and terms that are referenced here in the IRC. So that was a concern of mine. I think the purpose statement doesn't feel very code-like. It seems like we should just be having an applicability statement that talks about where, if adopted, where it applies. I can appreciate the discussion on why a jurisdiction might want to adopt this section, but that really is in, the presentation to the public in that jurisdiction to see if whether or not they want it, not something that's actually included in code language. So those are my comments.
Yeah, I think those are both fair comments. The purpose statement was pulled directly from the ANSI. And we put it there because people don't have experience with Type C units because there's not currently a pointer to them. So we thought that provided some context and might help people understand what it's all about. The IRC does send us over to the Building Code Chapter 11 already, so I think we can use that without adding additional language back here, but the intent here was to keep it short and clean if possible.
Any additional comments, questions for Chris? All right, I'm not seeing any.
Sure,
Okay, go
I'll
ahead.
I'll say something. Yeah, I also kind of agree with the things that Annie and Patrick have said. The purpose statement seems more like a user note, and is pretty long-winded. And I think, I don't know how. I'm not really sure how the whole process works with like the multiplex housing that we have a separate tag for, but it seems to me like that's really more the group that should be looking at what is FHA, what if FHA requirements do we need to make sure to incorporate? And I get that this is like an optional appendix, but it feels like it goes a little too far for just a general appendix for all of the IRC. Yeah.
Yeah, I can explain why we chose to go this route. We as a city are not permitted by state law to submit an optional appendix for our own jurisdiction. We cannot create this appendix on our own, even with State Building Code Council approval. We were advised that it had to be this way for our jurisdiction to adopt this.
Quinn.
And then just one more thing to answer why it's not at the multiplex tag. Multiplex tag is for one structure. The intent of this is for multiple duplexes, like Chris was saying, on the site itself. We've had a lot of projects coming in that are like there's 10 different duplexes on that one parcel. So it's not necessarily a multiplex scenario because that's a one building. This is multiple buildings added up to, like you said, 30, 40 dwelling units on that site.
Annie.
So would this apply, Chris, if somebody has their main dwelling unit, they have, an ADU in the back, and then they've created a little, she shack that could be easily
Nope.
interpreted as a sleeping unit. And so now we've hit 3 and
Nope.
we have to have one that meets.
Nope. The way this is written, you have to build 3 new units. So if you had an existing duplex and added a duplex in the back, it would not apply. Even though you have 4 units on the site, you have to build 3 units at one time. So I think that's why the scope is pretty clear that we're talking a multifamily development using the IRC and not just someone building an ADU for their parents or to make some extra cash. This is really a multifamily development using the IRC.
So would you be opposed to actually using the terms duplex or two-family dwelling or townhouse as part of your applicability rather than just saying new dwelling and sleeping units?
Not necessarily. It's within the IRC, so it's really whatever's within the scope of the IRC as long as we build 3 new things. But the way we say it, I don't really particularly mind.
I guess my concern comes in is if these are all just individually used by the person who's building 3 physical structures on their property.
I guess they'd be separate dwellings, right? So
Well, it says, or sleeping units, and so you could just have a remote sleeping house that maybe the son who comes home from
Sure.
college during the summer has to stay in when he's home. And yet, they're not being rented out. And it just seems like it could apply or could be interpreted by a jurisdiction as applying to, you got
Yeah.
3 buildings and we'll call it a dwelling unit or we'll call it a sleeping unit. And now you have to have one of these meet the visitability requirements.
Okay, I know, I see the question. Interesting. I had not considered that because, man, I wish I had that much money to build a property like that I had 3 extra houses. But I wouldn't be opposed to putting that in there somehow.
Again, if the issue is to address rental units, is there a way we can weave that in and say, if you got more than or 3 or more, I guess is what you're showing, 3 or more that are, not owner occupied, then you have to do this. Because I mean, I can see where you're coming from, and I would feel just like you, but you know, I'm on the Olympic Peninsula, we're pretty remote, and it's not uncommon to have a few sleeping units, just individual buildings out on the
Yeah.
property.
No, I hadn't considered that. I think that's a good point. And that is the intent. The intent is to capture these developments that are operating like apartment complexes, but using the IRC.
Josh?
I'm just letting you know for roll call purposes, I will have to walk away at 10, but I will be back on as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. Thank you, Josh. Any other questions for Chris? Quinn?
I heard the term owner occupied, so just be careful on that one. That there we had that in one of our language before, and we purposefully removed it. So, and I forgot what the reason. I mean, I guess it's more of an enforceability.
It
Why?
had been it
Yeah,
had been related to ADUs.
yeah. So I just caution there.
All right. Seeing no other hands up, we'll move on. And thank you, Chris, for presenting. All right. I'm not sure why this keeps goofing around my size there, but the next one is from Quinn on R330.2, automatic sprinkler systems. This is 24 GP2026.
Yeah, this one's actually also a Wobble thing, but I kind of did a last minute throw in. But yeah, this is backed by Wobble as well, TCD. And we actually, and I brought this up earlier in one of our previous meetings, but this is it's actually required already. This is just a clarification added to the IRC. The only way that you currently get to sprinkler system is through the definition, which then takes you to the RCW. And I looked up the RCW, and it's item number F that sprinklers are required for when you have more than 6 and less than 8. So it's already a requirement, but you just have to go through multiple steps to get there. So this is just a clear way for designers, building code officials, to basically say, yeah, you got to do it through the IRC, rather than jumping around.
So it essentially brings the requirement that's only in WAC at this point to the code.
Not WAC, RCW.
Oh, sorry, you're right. My bad.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, I generally don't have any problem with this, but I was just wondering, I guess my concern with trying to implement stuff that's in RCW that's very specific, but like what if the RCW changes during the code cycle? It could make it confusing. Is there a way that we could like point to the RCW so that it's clear that that's where this requirement is coming from? And then if something were to happen in the middle of the code cycle, it would at least be easier to know that.
I mean, it's already there, pointing to the RCW in the current language. My experience has been, it's harder to change an RCW than it is to change the I codes, right? So that's the reason why, to me, I don't see that scenario ever happening where the RCW gets changed. But it could. Never say never, but it's unlikely. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I noticed because we were talking about adult family homes and scoping, I noticed that the definition is a little loosey-goosey because it doesn't really say in order to build or in order to have 8 people, under the IRC, you need to follow that RCW. It's the language is a little bit more passive. It says like, well, DSHS might increase to 8 per the RCW, but like DSHS sounds like they're the ones enforcing the RCW, not us. So I like that this is a little bit more like, hey, the code is saying you need a sprinkler system to have 8 people and not relying on that RCW. Although what you've just explained that because I was thinking the kind of the opposite, the RCW could change and eliminate the sprinkler requirement. And then I don't know that we were, in the IRC, there's nothing that actually requires it. But if it's harder to change that, that makes me feel a little bit better. But I do think we should, maybe look at the definition in concert with this because now they're, the definition is, I don't know, they're similar language, but they're not the same.
Yeah. So looking, if you actually go to that RCW, So I think the reason why it says may is because if you go to RCW, DSHS, there's I believe like A through G, and every single item has to be met before it. Let me turn on my camera here. So I'm doing a lot of hand motion. You guys are not seeing it. A through G, there's certain criteria that if you don't meet it, then DSHS will deny the application. This is just saying rather than going back and forth, like we punt it to DSHS and then they punt it back to us. We're just saying, hey, if you decide to do 6 or more, 7 or 8, then you got to have a 13D system or 2904. You still need to go through DSHS to get permission. So it doesn't change anything really. At the end of the day, it doesn't change anything.
Annie.
Couple questions for you. How is this different than your proposal 043? Was the last one on that list?
Refresh my memory on that one.
Just the very number 21. Because the wording's different, but it's supposedly the same code section, unless I'm misreading something. So if you go down to the very bottom one, Dustin, that one.
Should be the same. I don't think
This
should be
might be a
only one.
duplicate, and I may have missed this one.
Is it the language in 3302 is different in each of these proposals? So do we have a favorite over one over the other?
Huh. Oh, I wonder if I sent it twice to you. I think the one on the right might have been the more recent. I'm good with either one. They both say pretty much the same thing. Um, I think the one on the right, I grabbed the definition. Because if you look at the one on the right, that's pretty much in the definition, right? But then on the one on the left, it's more code language. But either way, it's fine. I'm good with either one.
So my only suggestion is if the tag decides to go with the 026, the one on the left, can we please say providing services to 7 or 8 adults rather than to more than 6 and less than or equal to 8? Since it's only applying to 7 or 8 adults. Can we just say 7 or 8 adults?
Again, I just grabbed it from the definition. That's what the definition was like. So I'm good with either one. Yeah. Micah has his hand up.
Micah, you're not unmuted.
Yeah, sorry, it froze all of a sudden. That wouldn't undo. I believe the one on the right is technically accurate, but what is on the left is how it's supposed to be submitted. We're supposed to start with the ICC language, which doesn't exist. So it would actually show that this is new language coming into our code. The one on the right is the Washington WAC and how it's shown, and that's not how we're supposed to submit the proposal. So I believe the one on the left is the accurate one for you, Quinn.
Okay.
And then I would say stick with the current language we're proposing because it does match the definition when we start getting there, the up to 8 adults or whatever, things like that. There's 10 different ways you can write it, but I think this aligns more with the WAC language from DHS, DHYS, however you say it. Anyway,
I believe the one on the right was
part of the alignment we have been doing with them for the last couple of years, where they've been working very closely with the code officials to get language and components of what they require aligned, so we're not out of step with what they're doing. Many of you may not be aware is we didn't have much alignment previously. They were allowing waivers for up to like 30 kids in a residential house at one point. I'm sure you've all had the meetings with us here at the SBCC, and just way out of alignment. So this is just further aligning the codes and their requirements. So we're not out of step because we're now seeing these when we used to not see them. as much come into our offices. So just further alignment. Hopefully you all will support it. Thanks.
So with that, would it be appropriate, Quinn, to withdraw this one that's on the right-hand side, number 043?
Correct.
Okay.
Because I think that was my original, and we changed it to the one on the left. So I'm not sure how you got the one on the right. Might have been sent
I think
earlier
it came
than I
in
just-
late and it was separated far enough on our spreadsheet that I didn't correlate them.
All right.
So
No worries. No worries. Yeah, get rid of the one on the right.
okay. Getting rid of that one. Any other questions for Quinn on number 026? Not
And then
seeing any-
obviously the code section will probably change based on the model code.
Yeah,
It'll be
just to
quite-
remember it to fit in where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Jen?
The existing adult family homes here seems a little bit weird. I kind of get that in the definition because adult family homes have been 6 and DSHS will only allow existing ones to increase, but that's more their deal, right? But here, when is a sprinkler system required? I don't know that we need to actually condition it that it's an existing. I just want us to think through that a little bit more. It's like any, whether it's new, because they could change, because, they have that deal that they want to wait 2 years before they allow an increase. That may change. They may go, you know what, if you're putting a sprinkler system in, go ahead and start with 8. And then we have this like, well, only an existing one can have this, right? Or requires it. A new one wouldn't require it. So maybe we just get rid of existing.
So just get rid of the word existing and just start with adult family homes providing services to more than 6. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do like Annie's suggestion to just say 7 or 8 or more than 6 could be enough. And then DSHS will limit them to 8. Like that's the problem with like that definition being like DSHS is going to do some things. It's like, okay, let's just put in here what we are requiring. Whether or not DSHS requires a sprinkler system, I think this group would want one, right? For 7 or 8 people.
So then my question is, would we need to change the definition then? Because if we change it to more than 6 and eliminate less than or equal to 8, we would need to update the definition as well.
I mean, either way, we can just say 7 or 8 because that's the only thing, or the way you have it. I mean, the way you have it is accurate. It's just a little cumbersome to read. But I do think that definition is odd in that it sounds like we're requiring things, but we're not. We're saying like DSHS is going to require things. And that's true of, a lot of things, right? Like we don't have, like in the family home childcare, we don't have like a couple of the requirements of the licensing in there, right? We have what we require, and then they have licensing requirements that match and exceed that. So it just maybe needs some cleanup there, but at the same time, we could leave the definition alone. And this is, I think, sufficient for the sprinkler system.
Okay.
Angela.
Okay, so as far as for the word existing, I agree with taking it out because we've actually had instances where they build brand new adult family homes for 8 that are replacing one that they already have had for a couple years that are smaller, and they are allowed to do that. They're allowed to go up. They're 2 people with a brand new structure. So I agree with that. And then as far as removing the 8 and just saying more than 6, we probably could do that and leave the definition alone because the definition of adult family homes limits it to 8 for it to remain in the IRC. Over 8 would go to the IBC. So, I mean, we need to keep it somewhere. We can't just say adult family homes because we're not allowing huge adult family homes in the IRC. So, I mean, but having it just in the definition could probably work also.
Okay. So Dustin, do you want me to make the changes and send it and then we can look at it next time?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, that's an easy change. It's just basically removing 2 items. Keep it simple. Thanks for the feedback.
All right. Pardon me. Moving on. Whoops. Back did that go? To Justin Carvalho, IRC section R102.7, the application of the fire code. This is 24 GP2027, and Justin is online with us. And so let me get it pulled up and I will turn it over to you to guide me.
All right, thank you. So I just wanted to be clear with this one. This is not meant to replace or amend any existing sections. This is just supposed to be a new section added in. And this is essentially just adding in language that's already in the fire code. It's essentially copying that over and editing the names of the codes to fit where it is now. It was brought to our attention that number 2 in this amendment would potentially conflict with duties and responsibilities of the building official. So we were asked to strike number 2 from the proposal. But other than that, it's just meant to be a clarification of the code to make it clear that in addition to the residential code, you also have to comply with the fire code if your jurisdiction adopted those access requirements.
So there's a plan then to submit a version that it has just number 2 struck from it?
Yes.
Okay.
As well as any other amendments people would like to see.
Any comments or questions for Justin? Ken?
So you'll just need to update the reference standards section to point to 102.7 since you're referencing the IFC, just for clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And then just for my, who told you that you can do number 2? Because again, it's verbatim out of the fire code.
It was just in a conversation with our local building official. He took number 2 to be kind of going against, conflicting with duties and responsibilities of the building official, which to appease that, I'm okay with striking it, but like you point out, it is verbatim from the fire code.
Yeah, my public comment, not being a member of the tag at the moment, is I would keep it in there. I think it's if you're going to copy verbatim out of the fire code number 1, you might as keep the number 2 in there too. So the user of the document realizes that you have to comply with the administrative, operational, maintenance provisions of the fire code, which the fire code official enforces. So it's more of an informational thing.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I can see if you have a jurisdiction that has a separate building official and fire marshal, and if this one is basically trying to pull in the administrative parts of the fire code, I could see how building officials may have a concern with that if they're not the fire marshal. My concern with number 1 is if I'm reading this, it's not abundantly clear what all sections of the IFC I should be looking at. It other than, you know, it says specifically 105.6, but it seems like the first sentence is referring to multiple sections. So is is a builder looking at this just going to have to know wherein to go all look and have to figure it out with their building official or fire official, or can we make it clear what sections specifically are applying?
Yeah, so we could make it more clear if that's a request of the tag here. This was kind of a clarification in response to a situation we had where a gentleman came in to design a house and he went through all the residential code requirements, finally submitted it for permit and was rejected because it didn't meet access and site fire flow requirements. And he was a bit upset about that, fought us on it, saying that there was no clear point in the residential code that pointed to needing to follow the fire code.
Jen?
Yeah, I don't know that the IRC needs to do that because I think the fire code is doing it on its own. And we recently had a conversation similar about the energy code because we were sort of striking these references to chapter 11. And one of the arguments was like, okay, well then what replaces it? The energy code. And we were talking about, should we tell people in the IRC, you also need to comply with the Washington State Energy Code? And we decided no, because the applicability and the authority to apply that is within the energy code itself. So instead of just doing this one, because of this one specific instance, I would think we should maybe think about, does the IRC need to point to those other ones? And should we do that, you know, holistically and list all of them? Because if we are going to add this and say it has to be here, otherwise we can't enforce it, then we also can't enforce the energy code on new single family houses.
Thank you for that. Yeah, this was just based on this one situation, and being that the fire code specifically referenced both the building and the residential code, it's just kind of tying it back to there. But I can see the point of potentially needing to tie it into more than just the fire code there.
Annie?
I agree with Jen regarding this. It winds up becoming the burden of the building department to identify the codes that are applicable in their jurisdiction. And, you know, putting it all in the IRC, referencing the plumbing code and the electrical code and all that, energy code. I don't know that this is the right place for it.
Jen?
Yeah, also, since I am a building plans examiner, my first thought looking at this was actually like, oh, does that mean, so I'm enforcing the IRC, so does that mean now I have to enforce these parts of the fire code? It's a little just like, is this now my responsibility because it's here in the IRC?
Yeah, and this was just meant to clarify that the fire code does apply where it's adopted. So I know it specifically references stuff like fire apparatus access and water supplies, and I know that that's in chapter 5 of the fire code, which isn't adopted in every jurisdiction. So it is, if your jurisdiction adopts it, then it would apply, but yeah.
Okay.
So
Jen, go ahead.
Well, so, but this is applying all the time. So it doesn't, where does it say if your jurisdiction adopts the fire code? Because this would make it always required, not just, I think.
Yeah, and if there needs to be some added language in there to make that clear that it's only where it's adopted, then we can definitely add something in there to make it more clear in that. Because this is all meant to just be further clarification. I'd hate to further muck the waters with a clarification here.
All right. Seeing no other hands coming up. Michael, do you have a comment?
No, I do not.
Okay. Moving on to the Michael's unmuting so he can present on number 028 for minimum room size in section R312.
Hello, good morning. Michael Gilbride. I'm a buildings plan examiner at the City of Seattle, and our proposal is for the minimum room area. And it's the overview is basically we are shifting the requirement from a minimum room area to a overall minimum area for a dwelling unit. So dwelling units shall have at least one habitable room with a minimum floor area of 120 square feet and not less than 7 feet in any horizontal dimension. This is a change from requiring every habitable room to be 70 square feet. And the purpose of this is to allow for smaller separate rooms. Typically, we've been seeing offices that are off of the main area, a bedroom or the main room that are separate and are less than 70 square feet, but don't present any fire safety or health issues or livability issues because they're in a larger dwelling unit or in a larger house. So if Dustin, if you want to go down to the diagrams on the last page, that might be easiest. So I think it's all the way at the end. There's some diagrams. Here you go. So this is sort of what we are seeing. You know, I think the code has remained the same for a very long time, but the residential trends have changed, and this configuration seems to be more and more prevalent. In addition, currently the code doesn't really have an overall area minimum for dwelling units. This is the only area requirement in the residential code. So our change now allows for dwelling units to have a minimum area requirement to meet minimum livability standards. So that is the overall intent of this proposal, is to allow for smaller separate rooms, provide some design flexibility, and also bring in a minimum dwelling unit area as we see more ADUs and DADUs start to come into play. And if you scroll down to the other diagrams, you'll see sort of this is what is currently can be built under the SRC. And then this would be allowed, and this is sort of the minimum area, sort of an example of a small minimum dwelling unit. So that's I think that is the purpose, is sort of to provide the flexibility and also start to address some of the changes that are coming with the middle housing and other legislation. And Dustin, if you want to just scroll up to the benefits, I think that might be a good place to just end. There you go. Right there. And yeah, I'm open for questions and discussion.
Patrick.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this forward. I actually like this. I think this is overall a good change, and I've actually lived in a 120 square foot dwelling unit. It's a little tight, but I think you know, it gives you an affordable place to stay when you're going through college or just starting out. I was actually wondering, I know that the 120 square foot kind of minimums in the IBC, and I think it's been in a long time in New York stuff, but is there any reason we couldn't go lower, like say 100 square feet?
You know, I think that has been discussed, and we go back and forth. I think we kind of landed on 120 square feet because of the alignment with other codes. I think where that exact minimum, is where that livability minimum is always sort of a hard question to pin down, whether it's 120, 100. I think 70 seems very small to me for livability. Trying to fit all of the requirements for a dwelling unit in that small of a footprint is very difficult. So I think 120 is where we ended up.
Okay, and then I have one other question. I think my only potential concern with this is, so like theoretically right now you could have a dwelling unit with rooms that are 70 square feet, but under this they would have to have at least one bedroom that has 120 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
But that seems to me to be the only niche sort of change that would be kind of negatively impacted by switching to this. Like you might if you don't necessarily want like a big master bedroom, but you would kind of have to have a large bedroom that's 120. No, am I wrong?
Well, you only need one room. So if you had a living room and there was 120, then your bedroom could be 70 or 60.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
So it's only one large room.
Annie.
So we're comfortable with a 6x9 bedroom if they have a 120 square foot living room.
Yes. I mean, I think that there are, some instances where that might be reasonable. Sometimes there may be a small child's room that is 6x9.
Ron, I see you're unmuted. Did you have a comment or question?
Yeah. Boy, we inspect some manufactured homes that have these older ones that have bedrooms that are 6x9, and that's just squeezing it pretty tight. I think the 70 square feet is probably the minimum. I know that's not a lot of difference between the 6x9, but 7x10 is pretty minimal. And the other thing is you're probably, even though Patrick agrees with what you're trying to do here, I think you're going to get some pushback from industry that we're leading towards a prescriptive design standard for a minimum house. And that kind of bothers me in saying, okay, you got to have this size room and then this size room and then this size room. And the code is, left it pretty much alone and just left it with the 70 square feet on the bedrooms.
Well, that was the issue, is it's all habitable rooms. So it's not just bedrooms. And we did kind of explore trying to limit the 70 square feet to bedrooms, but decided that this provided more flexibility and left that to the discretion of the applicants and the designers and the market, basically. In this, we're not prescribing any other size than you just need to have one room that is at least 120 square feet. Other than that, there's no other room size requirements.
Okay.
So just for clarification, this does not remove the requirement to have a 70 square foot bedroom?
This does.
So the bedrooms can be 6x9?
They could be 6x9.
Okay.
I mean, the whether they're, used as a bedroom or end up being an office, it depends, on the market and the applicant and the people living there.
Yeah, I'm just kind of a little bit conflicted because It's a great solution to those little office nooks. I mean, that's what I'm saying. This is a perfect solution for. And yet, you know, I've been in those older houses that have bedrooms that are literally, you know, 6 feet wide, and it's tiny.
It is tiny. One of my youngest lives in a 7 by 10 bedroom, and it's tiny. But I see we could probably lose a foot each way and still make it work. We had to build a custom loft because the no loft bed would fit in that space. But I don't think there's any health or even considering it's part of apartment livability. You know, he's in there when he needs to be in there to go sleeping and for his own thing. So,
Micah?
That's great, but can we scroll back up to the code change proposal? You don't mind, Dustin, and we can have a little more discussion there. I know a lot of folks are talking about the minimums right now. In the residential code, remember this is a residential code change. You could have your one habitable room be 70 square feet at this point without a bedroom. That's what the code allows. So thinking that you're getting larger now, you technically are not required to get larger now. So this is actually setting a little larger minimum for that one room that you are required to have. Now, when you provide other habitable rooms in your design, those would have to meet the 70 as the current code reads. But again, you don't have to provide those other habitable rooms in the residential code. So this is actually larger than the current minimum required design. So I definitely want to point that out. And then some of you may be already aware, the state legislature did pass some language that says we need to look at allowing smaller dwelling units in the building code. So there are proposals that are going to come in for that, but this is somewhat aligning with that direction and that, hey, we're providing some much needed flexibility on the dwelling unit sizes and minimum room sizes in the residential code. And then we're going to get the building code later. Anyway, thanks.
Angela?
Yeah, the other thing is this is a life safety code for the most part. And so having a smaller bedroom than the 70 square feet, you know, I mean, it's a nice to have, but it's not a required for life safety. Again, I think the room and like the apartment sizes and stuff, some of those came from health concerns way back when. And so, you know, saying that a 6 by 9 or something like that is too small, you know, you have to adjust the furniture, you have to do whatever. It's a room to sleep, not necessarily our responsibility for it to be a huge playroom and things. So, I mean, I actually like this. I think it solves problems.
Micah?
Sorry, I wanted to throw out there one more thing. We allow sleeping lofts currently that are less than the 70. That's the requirement for those. Yes, they're labeled lofts at this point, but you can sleep in them. So again, I don't think we're losing anything with this code change at this point. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing nobody else unmuting or raising hands, appreciate it, Michael. And we will move on. All right. We are now to Angela's proposal for R102.2 adult family homes scoping clarification, proposal 24 GP2029.
I was actually gonna
Patrick's
suggest
gonna ask for a break. Is that what you're gonna do?
Yeah, I was gonna ask for a break.
Then a break is in order. How about a 10-minute? Just to give people plenty of time to get there and back. So resume at 10:45. All right. We got a lot of names on here still. We're not going to do a roll call. We'll just keep rolling. And we're on 24 GP2029, which comes to us. That doesn't help at all. From Angela, and she said she might have some spotty connection. So if she drops, I'll pick up presenting where she's at, and then any questions I can make sure we get over to her after the meeting. But Angela, are you available to present 029 talking about the adult family home scoping?
Yeah, this one should be fairly easy. I say that. Yeah. So it's basically it's a clarification to go along with an SBCC interpretation that was made earlier or last year, I think. And it just has to do with making it more clear that adult family homes are not required to be sprinklered in order to be built under the IRC. So instead of having it in the scoping where some people were then trying to throw it into the care facilities that are below in the exceptions, I just added it as an exception number 7 that basically just says adult family homes shall be permitted to be constructed in accordance with the International Residential Code for 1 and 2 family dwellings. So I don't know if there's any questions on it.
See some thumbs up in the group. Anybody with comments or questions for Angela? All right, see nobody coming open or coming up. We will close that one. And the next one is also from Angela, R329.2, stationary engine generator section correction.
Oh, I want to withdraw that one.
Okay, that's quick and easy. So let me update some notes here real quick. Okay, the next one then is also from Angela on R302.3.5, removal of stacked unit special requirements. This is proposal 24 GP2031.
Okay, so for this one, this is a proposal to remove this new section that was added to the base code. Basically, it's a section that was added to try to counter all of the states that have been removing the sprinkler requirements from the IRC. What this section does is it adds a sprinkler requirement back in for just stacked duplexes. Which would be it would go against the state's current stance on making sprinklers an option in the code. So again, are there any questions?
I see a thumbs up from Patrick. Nobody's unmuting. Thumbs up from Mariko. All righty. Moving on. This is also Angela's proposal for R302.3.5. This is an accessory dwelling unit within existing 2-family dwelling, proposal 24 GP2032.
Okay, so this one is a little bit more complicated. So first off, it removes the term accessory dwelling unit and just refers to it as a new dwelling unit. The term accessory dwelling unit is not defined in the IRC, but accessory structure is, and they don't mesh together. So in this proposal, I've gone on to remove the word accessory and just make it new dwelling unit. Also clarified that this applies to an existing 1-family dwelling unit, that you can't do this like within a duplex to make it 3 dwelling units. Let's see. It does change a few of the things on it. It could be taken to change it a little bit, so I want everybody to read it and make sure that what it says they agree with. But also it removes exception number 2 from our 302.3.1 because it's a duplicate of what's already been stated up in our 302.3. So instead of having it in 2 places, it's now in just 1. And then let's see. The second part is down. It has to do with, yeah, in alterations, repairs, and additions for, it's referring you back up to the top when you're doing, yeah, so where 1 or more sleeping units are added, or you created in the existing dwelling unit. So that section, it's just reverting you back up to the top to make sure that you are complying with section R302.3 for that new unit. And again, it's some language changes to remove the word accessory.
Alrighty, Ron, I see you unmuted. You have a comment or question?
Yeah, currently, if you have an ADU does not have to have the 1 hour separation from the main dwelling unit. Is this taking that exception out?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Jen.
I think it is because dwelling units, because that would create a 2-family dwelling, right? When you add another dwelling inside a 1-family dwelling, now that is a 2-family dwelling, and then it would need to be separated.
Right, but it says 1 new dwelling unit constructed within an existing 1-family dwelling need not meet the construction requirements of 302.3.1 through 302.3.5, which are your separation requirements.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. It's so hard to try to read this and
yeah, no,
think and listen at the same time.
Yeah, that's where instead of having it say it doesn't have to be considered a separate dwelling unit, because what the confusion has been for us is, okay, if you're not considering it a separate dwelling unit, are you requiring them access to the electrical panels? Are you requiring the separate, heating controls and things like that? Because if you're saying it's not a separate dwelling unit, then none of that technically should be required. Yet this is still sort of a leasable dwelling unit. So
Yeah.
that was kind of what we're trying to clear up by removing the considered a separate dwelling unit and just instead saying it doesn't have, because the purpose of this was so they didn't have to meet the construction requirements. Because when this was put in the code, the proposal was, because it's mostly these basements that we're dealing with, or the garages, where you can't really make an existing wall 1 hour, or you do it for a basement, you can't make head height if you have to alter the ceiling. So that's kind of where it is. So again, it was more just to get out of the separation, and that's what I'm trying to do here, is make that more clear.
Yeah, that's great. We've run into the same issue. It's like it's a dwelling unit, but it's not considered a dwelling unit. And so does it need an egress door and all that? So then that's very helpful, I think.
Any other comments or questions? All right, nobody's unmuting, no hands are coming up. So I believe that was your last one, Angela. I appreciate the presentations. All right, now we are on to a BIAW proposal from Riley Hellion. on section R301.2.2.1, the determination of seismic design categories, proposal 24 GP2033. And I think I saw Riley on earlier. Yep, there he is. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, my name is Riley with BIW. We received some member feedback on this, so we're proposing that we do not adopt the seismic design category map from the 2024 IRC. Instead, we're recommending we retain the figure from the 2021 IRC. Yeah, essentially the 2024 IRC changed to using one seismic map. They were hoping that that would streamline the viewing of them nationwide. They acknowledge that this results in some more conservative estimates. It makes many coastal regions. I don't know if you'd be able to maybe pull up the one from the 2021 IRC for a comparison, and if that could be helpful. Yeah, it jumps up many of the regions on the Pacific coast up to SDCE, which is the highest category risk. Washington soil and earthquake risks are different. So this map can kind of overestimate the danger here. It results in overbuilding and higher costs. So we're proposing to retain the 2021 map.
Thank you. I'm still trying to pull up the figure from the 2021 code, so give me just a moment. While I'm doing that, is there any comments or questions for Riley? Annie?
Just a couple observations. And it'd be interesting to get comments from the engineers that are on the call at this point. The peninsula at this point in time has a small dot of E over the city of Port Angeles. Everything else is D. And what we're finding by utilizing the ASCE hazard tool is that we're not finding E. We're not finding E in Squam or Port Angeles. We're not finding E anywhere on the peninsula. And I guess one of the questions I have for the structural folks is whether or not the ASCE 722 is being adopted by reference in the 24 codes. I did have the one engineer we have on the peninsula take a look at this and provide me a little bit of background. And now, if the definition of what is it, the S sub 1 changes, we will see additional E along the coast only. And one of the other things I just want to mention is if you take a look at the IBC seismic map, you'll only see E along the coast. And so if I mean, the challenge is as soon as we get into seismic design category E, everything needs to be engineered. And that's tough when you're in a large part of the, if you're on the peninsula and there's one engineer, it just winds up being a real tough ask, especially if we're not finding that it actually meets those criteria.
I also did receive an email from somebody who's not able to meet or be at this meeting today that they wanted to submit for this particular proposal. I'll pause for Josh, and then I'd be happy to read this email for this individual.
Yeah, so I was just going to comment on some of the questions sort of addressed towards engineers on the phone, since I'm one of them. And I'm sorry in advance, my answers might be a little lackluster, but the ASCE 722 is being adopted by the IBC. As an engineer, I'm designing every house to the IBC. I don't know many engineers who are using the IRC for design. So unfortunately, as it comes to prescriptive analysis, I'm going to be a little less experienced in that, but I will say the ASCE 722 does have a general increase in seismicity across our state. Whether or not that is applicable or appropriate, that I have not been able to discern. I'm not a seismologist, but trusting the ASCE 722, it's it's kind of where everything's heading. And if it is going to trigger people to require engineering, well, then they're going to be using those newer maps from the ASCE 722 either way. I'm hoping other people have some better information to provide on this map specifically, because again, I don't use the IRC in design. I use the exceptions that allow me to use IBC because I can approach things with a much sharper pencil that way. Hopefully that provides something.
Thank you. Wait.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hopefully you can hear me. I just jumped on. So I believe you're talking about using the older maps rather than the newer maps. I have been in meetings with ASCE 7 on the maps that are required that we do for this structural design. Those maps are definitely more accurate. They're more exact. It was developed, FEMA helped develop some of those things to work on it. There's people, Kelly Cobean, very active down in California, that's worked on them. And the one thing that's real important, and this has been discussed many times, the IRC and the IBC, okay, the IBC is a more exact engineering design. And those maps and stuff that are developed in the IBC should be the same in the IRC. Many times they do not get adopted or quickly enough. And so we actually should be using the most current data, because it is based on testing and USGS maps and stuff, or USGS studies. And we should not be going back, especially because this is a life safety issue when the earthquake will happen in this area. So correct me if I'm wrong, someone put a proposal in to go back to the old maps or the old procedures, which really is not correct and it shouldn't be done. The IRC and the IBC should not be different in those criterias when you're getting your design loads that are required to design for. So hopefully that makes sense. And correct me if I'm wrong. That's not what we're talking about right now. I was a little bit late jumping on because of some computer issues.
Patrick?
Yeah, I think the concern here is, while the proponents at the ICC level said that it was based off data, when you go look at the hazard map tool for Washington and you go into these areas that are now classified as E, you're not seeing that in the tool they're classified as E. So it seems like they made some assumptions when they made the maps, some generalizations that result in large portions of Washington going to be upgraded in seismic zone, contradicting what the tool said. I know there's desire for consistency, but if we require structural engineering for every single residential structure, not just on the peninsula, but parts of the Seattle metro area too, and other parts of Washington, like that's going to significantly increase not just the cost, but if you can't get a structural engineer, it could delay your project, it could affect the feasibility, it could just affect a lot of things really negatively.
Annie.
Dustin, could you bring up the seismic map from the IBC? I think it's what, 1613.9 or something along those lines?
Yes, 1613.9. You're looking for the 2024 map or the 2021 map?
24.
While I'm pulling this up, can I entertain another comment from Julius? Go ahead, Julius.
Can't hear you, Julius.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you go to IRC 301.2.2? That's the alternative determination for seismic category. Okay. And
what I was going to say is, if I'm going to different code sections, let me just finish up with Annie's comment, and then we'll navigate to the IRC. Is this the map you're looking for, Annie?
Yes. Yeah, if you go up to the western
Yeah,
part of the country.
whenever I change the size of the window, it bounces around, so apologies. Okay.
This is more consistent with what the engineer has found when looking or utilizing the ASCE hazard tool.
Okay. So just when you're talking to the engineer that you're working with out there on the peninsula, this design map is more consistent with what's published in the IRC when the designs are required and what people are using, is what you're saying, Annie?
This is what he is discovering when he utilizes the ASCE hazard tool, that along the coast, we're in seismic design category E, and the balance of the peninsula is in D.
Okay, so that little dot that's in Port Angeles is not relevant according to that design tool?
We have not been able to find an area in Port Angeles that's actually E.
Okay. Any comments back to Annie on that one before I move on to Julius? All right. Julius, where would you want me to navigate to again?
R301.2.2. But just to
301.2.
rebut Patrick's comment about the ASCE 7, when you use the ASCE 7 hazard tool, it will give you a seismic design category for a specific site, but that's for the IBC. The IRC has a different seismic design category, and those are a little different. So the
28.
if you go down a little bit, 301.
Oh, sorry.
301.2.2. So that's go down a little bit more. A little more. I think it's you're getting there. After the maps.
After the maps. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Right. So if an engineer wants a more refined, oh, not this one. Oh, this is IRC 2021. IRC 2024 is the one that we should be looking at, because that's the so in IRC 2024, it is true that most of the Western Washington area might be classified as seismic category E, because the seismic hazard in our area in general is increasing based on the latest science. But the IRC provision as an alternative determination, when you're in seismic design category D, you're allowed to go to seismic design category D2. So you go down a bit based on this provision, right there. Oop.
Just 2.2?
2.2.2.1. Oh, not that
2.2.
one. Sorry. Go down after the maps. One more page. Yeah. So this table, or maybe we can use this table. So, I believe most of Western Washington now will have an SDS of 1.25 G, which will classify it in seismic category E, right? And I think that's the concern from BIAW. But if you go to 301.2.2.1, item 1, it says, down, yeah, right there. Yeah, item 1, I think we can focus on this one. You're allowed to go down to D2 again if you check it with the buildings located in seismic design category E in accordance with the table that we looked at earlier, but it's located in seismic category D. Again, Patrick mentioned about ASCE 7 hazard tool. So when you go to ASCE 7, some of the location you will see seismic category D. Then you're permitted to do a seismic design category D2 in the IRC. So there are ways to, what I'm saying is there are ways to be within seismic category D2 with the new map. So we don't need to not adopt the latest map because we're going to seismic category E. So that's the point that I wanna share. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Julius. Hoyt.
Yeah, that's exactly to emphasize on Julius. You could look up and it's readily available to actually look at the address and pull up the ones that are according to this. And it is based, these numbers are not made up again, as I want to mention. So there is a path that you could go, like Julius says, but you know, the one thing I can't emphasize enough is, you know, based on statistics and everything that's been going on, we're in an active seismic zone. And because we're in an active seismic zone, there is areas where some of the prescriptive methods that are in the code are not valid when you're in that area where the seismic zone is. So I do think, you know, going to something less restrictive, besides saying, well, that's how it's been before. I mean, you could say that about going back to the 1984 Uniform Building Code. That's less restricted than what we designed to now. That's not the process we should be going. We should actually be going with the best available science. And the IRC and the IBC should really work together. And in this system, it's going to cause more cost for people because when you have engineers designing just parts of the building and not other parts, now you start having conflicts because you have both codes requiring different things. So that's not the point of the ICC Code Council. They do want them to work together. And I want to give an example of that. We changed the IBC because the IRC required a 3x3 washer and the IBC in the past was a 2x2 washer. Well, to make sure they both work together, we made both a 3x3 washer so you wouldn't have that conflicts in the codes. And I just wanted to emphasize that these codes are to work together, and life safety is what we're focusing on when you talk to seismic. And it's important to be consistent across the codes. And so if you don't change it now, you're going to be changing in the next cycle. I mean, progress goes forward, not backwards. So thank you.
Josh.
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a specific provision that I was trying to chase down, but I was in a webinar recently about the new ASCE, and one of the things they're emphasizing is the hazard tool is the official source of information at this point, and the maps are more for illustration purposes. That's not true of every map within ASCE, but the seismic maps are not the official source. The hazard tool is. So seeing less seismic design category E from the hazard tool is the appropriate place to look, and that map maybe is as an illustration is a little bit misleading, but I don't think it's quite as dire as it is or as it seems. I'd also bring up in terms of cost increase with using engineering, this can't be true in every case, but from what I'm hearing from almost all of my clients is that they are finding higher costs in the prescriptive design compared to engineering because of the pencil sharpening that an engineer can do, even offsetting beyond their fee. I think it's a valid point on availability of engineers, and I don't know exactly how many more sites are affected by this, and I don't mean to dismiss that half of it because I think that is valid, but I think the important points are if you're seeing better results from the ASCE hazard tool, that is the official tool. And just because somebody has engineering doesn't mean the construction cost goes up. In fact, most clients I'm working with are seeing construction costs down, even including the engineer's fee because of because of all the things that we're able to do with the IBC. That being said, I'm not involved in a lot of small prescriptive designs, but
good. I'm Ron.
That's my attitude on this.
Annie?
I appreciate this discussion because it's surely providing some answers in my mind. I do have, you know, I guess, why couldn't we just adopt the IBC map rather than the IRC map? The challenge that I'm finding here locally is if we have to use the alternate determination, some jurisdictions are requiring the engineer to make the call that it doesn't need to go to E. And again, it's just, you know, we have limited resources out here. And I would say the bulk of our buildings are engineered. It's the little shed in the backyard that's over the threshold for needing a permit. It's the detached garage or the small barn that they're building in the backyard now are going to be required to have engineering, just to determine that it's not even, you know, an E category. And so if we could work together, as you make reference, you know, couldn't we utilize the maps from the IBC? And then I'm just curious as to why there's such a difference between the ASCE hazard tool and the maps in the IRC.
Quinn?
Yeah, I just want to caution using an IBC map in the IRC because then we'd have to go and change everything in chapter 6 for shear walls, brace walls, right? Because all those tables are based on IRC map. If we were to use the IBC doesn't break it down to D0, D1, and D2 compared to IRC. So yeah, that's my only caution.
Josh?
Just a quick question to what Annie was saying. What is the trigger that you're seeing that's requiring engineering to use the alternative determination? Did you say that's just the local jurisdictions, you know, kind of caution? Or it seems to me that there's nothing in the code that's requiring an engineer to make that determination. So I don't know that we would make that change here, but if I'm missing something, I would love to know more about that.
It's local jurisdictions.
So just in general, I don't know if that means we need to change the maps at a state level to a less restrictive map because some jurisdictions are uncomfortable with the code language.
Any further discussion? Jen?
Would it be an option to just provide the ASCE report showing the site class for that specific place and then being able to just design it prescriptively to D2 from there? Like, so you don't have to necessarily hire an engineer, but anybody can look that up and see that specific site. Maybe they would be comfortable with that.
Wait.
Yes, that's actually right. If you go to the ASCE map, right, you could do that. Exactly what you just said, because it is a more specific thing. This is a prescriptive requirement. So if you're able to pull that up, you can say, yep, the way the IRC is written, you got to follow everything in the IRC. It's a prescriptive method, but you're able to pull some from the IBC and use that data. So the answer to that is yes, that is correct. You could do go online, type in that address, and if you get a different one, you could follow that.
Quinn?
Yeah, so excuse me, just to expand on that, that's one of the things I do at the counter when I help, you know, homeowners is we go on the ATC tool and identify, okay, what's your SDS, right? And so then I look at that SDS, and if it's like 1.34 or 1.27, you know, then your seismic design category E. But if it's like 1.24, you know, that footnote, not footnote, but that number 1 right there that Julius mentioned, then I'll be like, yeah, go ahead and use chapter 6 D2 to design your base walls.
Josh?
Just to point out for those who may not be aware, the hazards tool we all keep talking about is free and available to the public, just as a consideration.
Patrick.
Can we just remove reference to the maps at all and just have people go directly to the tool? Seems like that would cut out the problem.
Josh.
I'm hoping someone else can help me out with this. My understanding, Patrick, is that is not only the intent of ASCE and the people developing these maps and IBC and IRC, but that is how we're supposed to do it. My understanding is the maps are no longer the official source of information. They're for illustrative purposes. Though I'll have to admit, I have not been able to track down confirmation of that. So hopefully other folks on here can help me see that, but the maps are not the official data source anymore. And my understanding is you are required to use the ASCE site. I don't know if that's how everyone's enforcing it or if I'm just under a misconception. If other people have better information on that, I again would love to know. Thank you.
Wait.
Yeah, just to add that, yeah, that is actually how you're supposed to do it. The maps are so hard, especially when you're getting along the lines, you know, you can't zoom in enough. So these maps is kind of giving a general reference, so you kind of know where you're at, but you are supposed to go on the online time. And then here's the other thing. In the IRC, they have other factors. They have K-sub ZT, right? That, like in the city of Tacoma, I think we do a default, no matter what, it's a K-sub ZT of 2. But many times we get where they can actually calculate the K-sub ZT for wind. This is wind, if people aren't aware of it, where it's actually a lower value. We've mapped our whole city where you can use a lower K-sub ZT and use that. But if you want to just do the prescriptive, you have to use 2. This is easily available to anybody these days that have a computer to get the value directly from ASCE hazard tools. And I do, as I said, I don't want to be repeating myself, but hopefully we go that route. And the maps, I think, are very difficult to use anyway, especially when you're right on the borderline when you zoom up on addresses. So hopefully that helped.
Alrighty. At this point, I'm going to read the email comment that we have and then try to wrap up discussion on this proposal to try to get to the rest of them. But this is a comment from Scott Newman, a practicing engineer, structural engineer. It's an opposition comment to this proposal. And as a licensed structural engineer in the state of Washington, I do not agree with the technical basis presented in the proposed amendment. The proposed amendment states that the primary reason is that the 2024 IRC map lacks consistency, as these maps are different from both the 2024 IBC and the ASCE hazard tool, which utilize the latest data ASCE 722. IBC and IRC maps for seismic design category are not intended to be identical as discussed in IRC commentary section R301.2.2.1, which states, like the somewhat similar IBC maps, this code's SDC maps are based on the NEHRP recommended seismic provisions for new buildings and other structures and ASCE 7. This code's maps have been developed in collaboration with the United States Geological Survey and are based on their national seismic hazard models. The site-specific ground motion procedures of the 2020 NEHRP recommended provisions, ASCE 7, and this code's definition of SDC. The maps included in the 2024 IBC and 2024 IRC were both developed from the same set of USGS data, and the maps included in the 2024 IRC are based on the most current understanding of earthquake risk for structures governed by the IRC. Several paths are already provided in the 2024 IRC to reduce the seismic design category, including the alternate paths provided in R301.2.2.1.1, alternate determination of seismic design category, and R301.2.2.1.2, alternative design determination of seismic design category E. Lastly, potential costs of the proposed amendment are unaddressed, such as potential increased insurance costs for homeowners for buildings that are not designed to the intended performance requirements of the National Code, and potential increases to Washington State disaster relief obligations. That's by Scott Newman. And I think that we touched several of those topics that he was addressing. And I guess any further comments on this proposal? All right, I'm seeing no hands coming up. Quinn?
Yeah, Dustin, that's actually a good point. I didn't think about that until you read it out loud. So I am on the Emergency Management Council for the state, and that's one of the things that has been ongoing discussion is reimbursement by the federal government on disaster relief. And so if we're not in compliance, then homeowners are not going to get reimbursed. So that's a good point to consider for this tag.
All right. Thanks everybody for the discussion on this one. We will move on to, I believe it is 034. This one's from the Seattle, is the I forget the acronym, but it's Scott Douglas is the proponent there, or the contact, and this is for table R301.2 and figure R301.2 number 2, special wind regions in Washington. Scott, you are online, and so let me pull this up and turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the purpose of this proposal is to align our current state building code proposal 24-GP1004 with the state residential code, and figure R301.2 parentheses 2, the IRC, it identifies by cross-hatching the special wind regions in Washington state. And these regions are along the Pacific coast. Yeah, I can maybe just zoom in. I'm not zoom in, but get full. Yeah, okay, there we go. So the special wind regions are along the Olympic Peninsula, Pacific coast, and along the west end of the Columbia River. And the wind maps, current wind maps, which this isn't that we're looking at, including the special wind regions, they're identical in the IBC and the ASCE 7 wind maps. And currently, both the IRC and IBC, they specify the AHJ to determine the wind speeds and boundaries in these special wind regions. And the special wind region speeds, they're estimates based upon limited information, and consequently, they're inconsistent from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And to eliminate these inconsistencies, the Structural Engineers Association of Washington commissioned a study based on state-of-the-art analysis with up-to-date data. And the results of the study are shown on this figure we're looking at right now, and this is in the proposal. And right now, existing figure R301 2 parentheses 2 footnote 6 and table and excuse me, yeah, and footnotes D and I in table R301.2 will be revised to reference this added figure we're looking at now and specify the IRC special wind regions as 120 miles per hour. And the proposal for the state building code, the 24-GP1004, it already has been approved by the TAC committee and the BFRW standing committee. And so this proposal is just to align the IRC, which is risk category 2, with the proposal that's currently before the state building code. And also I should add, in ASC 728, these special wind region boundaries and speeds have been approved by the Wind Engineering Subcommittee and now are before the ASC 7 main committee for vote. And once they're approved, they'll eventually become in 728 part of the hazard tool. So I guess I can entertain any questions on this.
All right, I'm seeing no hands. Up there's a hand. Annie.
This is going to be quite a relief for what we're actually designing in Clallam County right now, because all on along the coast from La Push, or I should say Nia Bay down, we're doing 130. So I'm happy to hear that they found that we're not blowing that hard up there. So if you could change Clallam in that map to be spelled CLALLAM, LLAM rather than UM in the upper left-hand corner, that would be great.
Whoops.
And
Okay, you
then
could
it was
tell
fine
I'm a
over there,
city
yeah.
boy. Okay.
And then the other question I had is, how was the 124th longitude determined? Do you know how they came up with that? Because that just it's just interesting that it landed there.
I'm sorry. How is the what determined?
The 124th longitude up in Clallam County. So where you've got
Uh,
number 1 up there.
Yeah. Boy, I honestly am not sure. We had a report and it's on, if you go to the SEAW.org webpage and look under um, resources, and it's wind engineering, WEC number 3, the white paper. It has the report from the consultant we retained, and they, it's all they have all sorts of computer programs and everything, and it's not really arbitrary, but I think it was what I want to say, a realistic boundary where the 120 stopped and the ASCE regular database begins. So, I mean, it could have been at 123 or 124.5, but they determined that by some method, and I would have to ask them.
Thank you, though.
But I think it was a reasonable boundary where the typical wind speeds they were comfortable. They were definitely appropriate. And this will decrease in general. It will decrease the wind speeds in the IRC, and also the boundary along the Olympic Peninsula is decreased from the present IRC, and also along the Columbia River, it's decreased. And then there's a 15-mile consistent boundary. If you look at not bullet point, but item 2, there's a 15-mile boundary, and then it transitions to the regular ASCE wind database. So that's beneficial for the few structures that are out there. Boy, this is easier than seismic. Wow.
Any other comments for Scott? All right, I'm seeing no hands coming up. Scott, thank you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
We do have another one from Scott for the ground snow load determination, table R301.2. So this is 24 GP2035. And Scott, the floor is yours once again.
Okay, maybe if you could scroll down to
You want the figure?
Right there. Yeah, that's good. Okay. This had Julius's help with that. I appreciate that. This just modifies footnote O of table R301.2. And instead of just stating figure R301.2 parentheses 3, it deletes that and says determined from section R301.2.3. And that section references both the figure and lets you go to use ASCE 7. So it's more accurate, and it gives the option of either. This technically, just the figure limits you. It what I want to say, it actually, this note should have actually referenced the section to give you both options to determine the ground snow load.
Josh.
I just want to echo support for this. I think this is in line with the intent of the code, but I can see how there could be confusion, particularly with any amendments we might make to the IBC and how this doesn't perfectly path to it. But I don't think there's any real life effective change. It's a clarification to make the code work as it was originally intended, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Joshua. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions for Scott? Patrick.
Yeah, Scott, is the intent of this one to match the the IBC proposal that was in for snow ground loads? Or is this supposed to be different?
No, the IBC proposal is under discussion. That Josh was, and I know our SEAW General Code Requirements Committee is looking at that to improve it, but has nothing to do with that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? Seeing no hands, thanks once again, Scott.
Okay, thank you.
We are on to 036. This one was a BIW one. Patrick, you indicated that you wanted to withdraw this one and the next one.
Yeah, yes. The vapor
Okay.
retarder and the EV charging.
Okay, so moving on to the WASIA proposal for R329 solar energy systems, Gavin Tenold, and it looks like John, you're prepared to speak in his stead.
Yeah, I just let him know that it's coming up, and he'll probably jump on very shortly because he wanted to speak to it. But this is basically one that's just harmonizing the some pathway and roof access for photovoltaic with the that was left out of the IRC, and it's still in the IFC. So we're just looking to get them back in the IRC, which they were in like 2015 to 2018, but they somehow are left out, but they remained in the IFC. And this was it's a result of the Council Opinion 2309, which kind of solidified that this is the intention.
And this, if I characterize it, provides a little more flexibility that's present in the IFC for solar installations on the roofs, correct?
It does. And it kind of rearranges it in a better flow as well.
Okay. Any comments for John? And if oh shoot, the name's escaping me.
Gavin.
If Gavin's not available, and he pops on and wants to speak back to this one, we could rewind back to it.
Sure.
Okay. Any comments or questions for John while we're here? All righty, seeing none, we will move on from 038. All right. Now, 039 is a Ken Brulette proposal for IRC 311 carbon monoxide alarms. And Ken, if you are on, the floor is yours. I see Ken's profile online, but he's not unmuting. So for this one, I will. Oh, Ron, go ahead.
I have several issues on it. I think it's one of those that it's a good idea, but it needs some real work. We have sleeping rooms, we have sleeping areas, we have bedrooms, none of which have definitions, and they're kind of flip-flopped and interchanged throughout this code proposal. So that should get clarified in order to make this thing work correctly. But in addition, it looks like he's adding in some sort of an added inspection or pre-inspection by the local jurisdictions, and I'm not sure that the local jurisdictions are ready to step forward with that. And then he's also adding a interconnection requirement between the carbon monoxide detectors that they're adding in multiple areas. So I think it's just before it went very far, after clarifying the issues, I think this needs to have some sort of an economic analysis done. That's it.
All
Did I
right.
lose everybody? Oh, okay.
You didn't lose everybody. Mariko.
Yeah, this proposal I found a little confusing to read, and so I wish the proponent were available to speak. But I think that more things are underlined than are actually the intended changes. I think that a lot of the underlined changes are already changes that we make as Washington State amendments. And so the actual proposal is for fewer changes than it looks like.
I would agree. I think what Ken was trying to do here is we had the old section for 315, and so he's saying to strike all of WAC 315 in the IRC, and then he's showing all of the changes that would show up in R 311. But Ken, you're unmuted now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got pulled into something else.
No sweat.
I
So
didn't think you guys were going to get to me. Did you jump over somebody?
we had a couple that were withdrawn and a couple that went pretty quick. So sorry for the surprise.
Okay, so I heard you guys talking about, yes, it's a renumbering issue, and also just, yeah, basically just delete the existing state amendment and take the 2024 code language and just tweak it a little bit and include some languages in a proposal for RB 100, and just take some of our state amendments and just kind of lay them in different areas. I don't think it's too complicated. I think the explanation kind of explains it if you went down there and somebody read it.
So did you happen to hear any of Ron's comments on that?
I heard nothing.
Okay. Ron, if you wouldn't mind maybe restating some of those issues you were looking into.
Okay, yeah, Ken, so, you know, I think it just needs some tweaking and some work. We need to get definitions for sleeping rooms, sleeping areas, and the bedrooms, because they kind of jumps back and forth in the proposal and makes it a bit confusing. And I'm reading in there, it looks like an added inspection being done by the local jurisdiction in there. And then the interconnection requirement for the multiple carbon monoxide detectors. And so one of the things I was suggesting is that a cost benefit analysis should be done on it before it got too far along.
Okay, so let's start with the interconnection part. Where's the they're already required to be interconnected.
All the carbon monoxide detectors?
Yeah, it's the only thing that I'm adding in there is clarifying that it's a carbon monoxide. That was just a clarifying code change. That the whole section talked about the alarm devices. It was just clarifying it's the carbon monoxide. So it's already required to be interconnected.
Okay, I guess I'll have to, I'm sorry, I did not, I was not totally aware of that. So on the 24 code, so.
And then with regards to definitions, I'd have to double check to see, I don't have the 24 code open, if there is not already a definition for sleeping area or not.
I think we went through that last meeting or meeting before where we're having these, trying to resolve the definitions on sleeping areas and sleeping rooms and whatever. So, you know, maybe a little work in there.
Yeah, because the current whack that I show up at the show has the words in there of sleeping rooms, and we currently don't have a definition now, do we?
I don't think so.
All right, so I haven't caused any more confusion, I don't think. But yes, it would be great. I can try to, we can work together as try to come up with a definition that works.
Okay, sure.
Quinn.
Yeah, personally, I actually like it. It gets us closer to more of a life safety requirement. If anything, personally, I would even go further and say instead of outside the vicinity, I would put it inside the bedrooms. Because almost every year, every winter, it never fails that there's always one or two family that dies from carbon monoxide poisoning every year. I mean, I have yet to live in it. You know, I've lived here since the 80s, and there's always news that someone has died because they've, put in a propane or some kind of gas type of heater in their room, and then they all die, right? So I think this is getting us closer to that life safety requirement. So
You bring up a good point, and Ron, since you do so many home inspections, and you probably don't remember that you did mine back in 2019 when I bought a house in Gig Harbor, which I appreciate you coming out. Dave McCurdy, Dave McCurdy recommended you. So I was quickly asking you, since you do so many, how many homes are getting installed with the combination carbon monoxide and smoke alarms? And that helps what Quinn was just talking about with they would be located inside the bedroom too.
Not very many, and most of them are something that we write up when we do the inspection. The actual appraisers are the ones that are forcing the issue because they won't approve the appraisal until the COs are installed. And then we have, the requirement there be one on each level. I mean, quite frankly, even though people may grouse, is that we should just make all smoke detectors dual purpose. Just not even banter around anymore. Just say, smoke detectors are required here, here, and here, and they need to be dual purpose smoke and CO. It would just make life so much simpler for enforcement, and it would kind of answer, like Quinn was saying, the life safety requirement. I mean, even the one in the garage, if there's a CO out there and they're interconnected, then it's going to trigger when the furnace malfunctions, it's in the garage, that kind of thing.
All right, thanks. I got nothing else.
Yeah.
You guys need to move on.
Alrighty. Moving on from 039. I appreciate the presentation, Ken. All right, we are on to an Eric Vandermeer proposal for IRC M1401.1 and Chapter 44. This is heating and cooling equipment and refrigerants, or not and refrigerants, but dash refrigerants. Eric, you're online. As I open this up, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. This is Eric Vandermeer representing myself. So this proposal, the first language here, the first sentence that's added to section M1401.1 is based on the 2027 IMC code change proposal, which is referenced later in the proposal for the model code. So that's just a duplicate of that language. I believe the first sentence is. The second sentence, the refrigeration systems containing carbon dioxide as the refrigerant shall be installed in accordance with Chapter 11 of the IMC, is a new provision that we're proposing adding to correlate to section 1301.1 scope provisions that basically say anything that's outside of the scope of the code, you go to the mechanical code, from the IRC to the mechanical code. So that's essentially just another pointer specific to the CO2 systems that we're starting to see on projects to meet the global warming and PFAS chemical climate change requirements that we're seeing. And then also an exception that's added, just anything that's not A1 and A2, has to be is governed under the IMC. CO2 is an A1 refrigerant, so we do need that second clarification sentence there in the charging language. That's just some cleanup pointers in the code and to correlate with the 2027 IRC, and then a reference to ASHRAE 15.2.2024. So that's something we've already adopted through the emergency rule on the mechanical code side, but we're getting this now into the IRC. This is the appropriate standard, a new standard that's been developed just specifically for single-family homes, townhouses, and also low-rise multifamily. But that is the applicable standard now, which is a new standard for how to properly use refrigerants. And then referencing the latest version of ASHRAE 34, there's been quite a bit of work on the A2L refrigerants and other refrigerants to properly classify both the LFL and RCL values for the EDVC calculations. So basically just pointers to get us up to current code standards for the 2024 codes.
Any comments or questions for Eric? Mariko?
So just to clarify, because I'm not super familiar with mechanical code, you said it was ASHRAE standards have been adopted as emergency rule. And is it the 2024 version that's been adopted as emergency rule, or the 2022?
Correct. It's currently the 2022 version that was adopted for the emergency rule. The 2024 version wasn't available yet when that petition was filed for the 2021 Washington State Mechanical Code. I am going to be looking at petitioning the state to update that emergency rule to the 2024 version. There's been several updates that have happened recently that jurisdictions are starting to use. Seattle just issued a bulletin yesterday regarding that. So yeah, we're actively working to probably update the 2021 mechanical code for Washington State and start a petition on that also. So.
All right. Any last hands on this one? Seeing no unmutings, no hands coming up. We will get back to the main list. I believe the next one is the next couple. The last two that we hopefully can get to today are from Eric. So 041 is on M1505 ventilation. And Eric, as this opens, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so this is 041 is in regard to ventilation. So these are changes to correlate with the 2024 code change proposals to clarify some of these definitions. So this is basically editorial to coordinate what's already been passed by the mechanical code tag for the Washington State 2024. So correlation of these definitions so they match between the IRC and the IMC for Washington State. This new addition of the habitable space that was discussed, the new terminology between interior adjacent rooms and interior jointed spaces to clarify those requirements in regards to ventilation. Yeah, so all this is just tracking to make the Washington State mechanical code match the residential code, and to also clarify some interpretation questions that the State Building Code Council answered on the 2021 code. So, yeah, I can try to answer any of those, any specific questions, but we're trying to just get the language to match between the two codes.
Boyd, I saw your hand up, but it's down. All right. If there's no other questions or comments, we'll move on to 042.
So 042 also has to do with refrigerants. So this is a new pointer in chapter 20, the boilers and water heaters section. So we're seeing you know, heat pump water heaters in residential uses as being promoted by the energy code, whether those are units that install interior or units that are installed exterior split systems to the residential units. So this again is the same language as in the previous proposal we looked at. So we're just being clear that these have to be installed per ASHRAE 15.2 or per Chapter 11 of the Mechanical Code. So basically pointers to those code sections that we have to properly use these refrigerants.
Any comments or questions? Seeing no hands coming up, I appreciate the presentations, Eric, and we will show the rest of this one. This 043 we discussed earlier this meeting was going to be withdrawn as well. And so that brings us to the end of the public proposals received by the IRC tag. And getting back to our agenda, that brings us to other business, which I have none. Does anybody else have any other business? Seeing no hands, I think we can adjourn this meeting 3 minutes early, and I appreciate everybody's presentations today. And thank everybody. And Patrick, you unmuted. You have some comments?
I was just gonna say thanks.
Yep. All right. Well, appreciate everybody's time today, and then we will see everybody next week, where we will begin finalizing the report process.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.